Good question from a client yesterday. In their words, roughly, they said, getting lots of traction, creating lots of opportunity, really, really busy, lots of conversations with the market. And I feel like I'm there. I feel like I'm really getting there. And I wasn't there a few months ago. And thanks to this program, I feel like I'm getting there. But something funny is going on. I also feel my motivation starting to dip a little bit. My motivation starting to wane. I'm a little bit less pumped up. My decision making is a little bit more hazy. I didn't feel this way in the beginning, but I'm starting to feel this way now that I'm really in the middle of it, in the thick of things. Have you seen this before? When I said never, you're the first person I've ever heard this for. I'm joking, of course. We see this all the time. Why does that happen?
Yeah, I have some thoughts, certainly. But the first thing I think that's really interesting, and I'm glad this person brought the question, because often people just sort of, go through this in silence. And the reason is that they are taken aback by the fact that they're not motivated when things are going well, right? We're used to being not motivated when things feel hard. We're used to being not motivated when it feels like we're, putting out a bunch of effort and not getting results. But what is just as common, maybe more common, is exactly what you're talking about, which is, okay, things are going well, I'm getting somewhere, and now I'm just struggling to move forward. And I think, there are a few reasons for it. One is, we'll see how many I end up with. I was going to try to pre-count them, but we'll see what we have. So I think one, I'll talk about them, then we can dig in. One is just whatever the goal is, right? If your goal was to start your business, if your goal was to get some clients, then realistically, practically you've met that goal. And therefore, it's a challenge to be motivated by it. You're no longer looking forward to something. You're kind of there already. So I think there's that. I also think that when you get to that place, and this is the part that becomes difficult ongoing, is you now move into a space of just having to do the work, right? It's not novel anymore. When he or she first started doing this, everything they were doing was novel. It was exciting. They weren't sure what was going to happen. They were getting the rush every time they turned around because they were trying something new. And now they're in the phase where they just need to do the work over and over and over and over again. And things can start to feel repetitive. And for some people, also not terribly motivating. So those are the first two things that come to mind. And I think we can kind of dig into both of them and help folks figure out how to get past.
Yeah, I think this is true for any goal pursuit. Is in the beginning, when you set a goal, everything's great because it's all theory, right? It's all you're doing is thinking about the future, creating this vision, thinking about what life is going to be like once you achieve this goal, but you're not yet in it. You're not yet in the pursuit, and therefore there's no pain, it's all gain. And lots of dopamines going off, right, flowing through your veins as you think about the future and what you're going to accomplish and how things are going to be. And then you actually get into the work and you're in the daily grind, right? This is like the person that wants to lose weight and now is running every day, right? And they're like doing their 5K. And in the moment, in the pursuit, it doesn't always feel good, right? You're in our client's case, it's lots of sales conversations, lots of objection handling, lots of talking to people that aren't going to buy, right? That's part of the process. Is you want to get people to buy, you got to talk to a lot of people that are not going to buy, right? Lots of dead ends, lots of, working with us and tweaking the offer and making changes, and all necessary work isn't necessarily the most sexy work. It's required, but isn't the most exciting. And so that's where you have to really kind of dig deep now and re-engage, why you're doing this to begin with, because in the middle is always harder than the beginning. And this is true for any goal pursuit. And, one of the things I said to the client as a way to resolve this conflict was change your goal. Because you now feel like you're in the middle of the pursuit. And chances are the goal that you set, if you're not already there, it's starting to feel realizable. You kind of feel like you're almost there. You can now really start to see how you're going to get there. Set a higher goal. right? Now, not for the sake of just setting a higher goal, because my argument here is also that chances are your initial goal was too low, right? And this is somebody that's relatively new in consulting. And, I think what we find is people's initial goals are often hedging goals, right? Safe goals, goals that, have them replacing a previous income. Topic for another day, I think, but they're usually not the real goal. So now set the real goal and then observe the gap between where you are and the real goal, the higher goal, and see how that motivates you. Because chances are, like you said in the beginning, that stretch between where you are and where you want to be was motivating, and you recruited creativity and resources and energy and motivation because the stretch demanded that of you. So manufacture another stretch by changing the goal and moving the goalposts out further.
Yeah, agreed. And the way that you're speaking about it, I think you're talking about like a top level goal, right? Probably number of clients or revenue, like whatever that rings true to that particular consultant. But I would also say that now's the time to look at your goals and be more precise about them. And yes, a bigger goal can be helpful. Also, just different goals can be helpful. Previously, if you're just starting out, you are trying to close a sale, right? Or, get some revenue to whatever number that is. But now that you have moved along, now that you are in the middle of the pursuit, you can start to see, if you drill down, where, setting some stretch goals for yourself is going to be the most beneficial. So maybe for one person, it is, in the sales conversation. That's the place where they're not being as successful. They're getting tons and tons of people coming in, but they're not converting very much. And so setting some specific goals around getting better in certain areas, I think, can also help, because, what I find tends to feel unmotivating is this sort of list of things I need to do every day. And this goes to the second point, right? The second reason for feeling unmotivated is having this list of things I need to do. And I think that's more challenging if you don't understand how each component is contributing to the final result, right? So whether it's your marketing at the beginning, whether it's the content you're putting out, whether it's the outreach that you're doing, whether it's actually the sales conversation, getting a bit more surgical and getting clear on where to give yourself more of a stretch goal, right? An improvement goal, a goal that's really going to give you some payoff can also be motivating, because it doesn't feel like you're just doing, your list of 14 things every day. It can feel like you're really trying to optimize the system that you built.
And I think the list of 14 things is part of the problem, right? This is pretty common, and I definitely experienced this early on as a solo. When you're starting to get traction, you're doing all the things, and then you realize that all the things is a lot of things for one person to do. And I think there's a sense of, well, I didn't sign up for this, right? Like, I became a consultant so I could swoop into client organizations and solve their problems and collect big checks and be the hero. And now I'm writing on LinkedIn. Like, what's going on here, right? Like, I'm at all these things I have to do that I didn't anticipate doing from a marketing, business development, offer creation perspective, that I don't know how to do these things. And that you learn, but now you're busy doing these things too, right? And I think, one of the messages I have as well is, that's for now. That's not forever. For me, I remember kind of being in that messy middle section. And what was helpful for me was, I didn't like doing all the things necessarily. But what was helpful for me was the acknowledgement that, well, this is temporary. And when I get enough traction and I have enough revenue, then I can bring people in to do some of these things. So I don't have to do it forever. So I knew it was temporary. It wasn't permanent. And, and even if you're not looking to build a big team and really scale, I mean, there's so much opportunity to outsource and delegate pieces of the puzzle, right? To a freelancer, to a virtual assistant, to somebody kind of on a fractional basis. And so there are people that can do all the things all the time, and that's perfectly fine. But I think for most people, acknowledging that the season in which you have to do everything is temporary, and there are opportunities to delegate and to outsource when revenue allows you to do so, and that hopefully gives you some light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, I think to me there's sort of two things underlying what you're talking about, or what we're talking about when it comes to having to do all the things, right? One is exactly what you're you're saying, the recognition or the, the feeling that this isn't something that I should be doing, right? My talents are best used elsewhere. I do believe, though, that the other thing, especially when you're in the messy middle, and our clients stumble over this all the time, is recognizing, accepting, and really buying into the fact that this marketing stuff, right, this business development stuff is necessary, that it is part of the job. I think one of the reasons that people end up so frustrated by it or demotivated by it is they see it as this extra thing that they didn't sign up for, they're not very good at, and they just want to kind of get it over with, right? Get past it so they can get to the thing that they really want to do. And, the reality is, even when you are going to outsource components moving forward, that doesn't change the fact that you are still the person who, owns this business, who needs to make sure all those things are happening. So I think if you can also stop fighting yourself, right? Recognize that this is a critical, perhaps the most critical component of your business, then, that simple mindset shift can also make it a lot easier to approach the ins and outs of the day-to-day stuff that has to happen.
And even if you ultimately want to delegate or outsource some of it, now there are certain things that you should not, cannot delegate or outsource, and maybe that's for another day. But even if there are parts of it that you want to understand that these are critical processes, and unless you really master them yourself, you can't possibly delegate and outsource and then provide the requisite oversight required unless you've really nailed it, right? So if you approach it, like you're saying, Carrie, like a box checking exercise, well, a box checking exercise is not going to get you results, first of all. And if you do ultimately delegate or outsource, then the results are going to be even more poor at that stage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just, switching topics a little bit here, I think, if we go right back to the beginning, I want to zoom out a little bit, and because we're sort of in the weeds now about how do you get the motivation to do the little thing, right? To take the next step, to do the next right thing. The other thing that's worth talking about is revisiting why you're doing this at all. We've talked about adjusting your goals. We've talked about, some tactics you can take with yourself to get yourself back on track. But the thing that I would invite anyone who is struggling with a lack of motivation to really sit down and spend some time on is understanding why you're doing this in the first place, right? What is the reason that you decided to start your business? What is the reason that you left your corporate job? What is the reason that you want to go through all of this, pain and agony? There are greater motivations afoot, right? There is a motivation to, support yourself and your family. There is a motivation to not be told what to do on a daily basis. There's a motivation to have unlimited upside. And I think once you end up in the weeds, it can be really easy to forget those, the big goals, the big reasons, right? The whys behind it all. And when push comes to shove, it's the why that's going to get you through, right? It's not the what, it's not the, the system you set up to decide where you sit and how often you go on a break and, all those things which are helpful. But what's really going to get you through anything difficult is understanding why you're doing it in the first place. And so if you're feeling unmotivated, now is also the time to really reconnect to that, right? To really remember why you're doing all of these things in the first place and, what your intention is.